Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to the Harris County Flood Control District's virtual community engagement meeting to discuss the Luce Bayou bypass channel. This virtual meeting is being offered by the Flood Control District to continue to share vital information with the community during this period when in-person public meetings have been suspended due to safety concerns from the COVID-19 pandemic. My name is Shelder Brigham. I'm with the Flood Control District's communications team. I'm joined tonight by a team of Flood Control District leadership and subject matter experts as we continue to keep you up to date on this important flood mitigation project in your community. We also have representatives from the Real Property Division. We're also joined by staff from area elected officials' offices and community associations. It's such a pleasure to see the community so engaged in this project, and we look forward to continuing to share updates and keeping all of you in the community involved. This virtual public meeting will begin with a presentation to share project updates and other important information for the Luce Bayou bypass channel. The presentation will be followed by a virtual question and answer session with Flood Control District team members. Attendees will be able to submit comments and questions through the website or by phone. Now, any comments not addressed during the Q&A session will receive a response from the Flood Control District after the event. Instructions on how to participate in the virtual open house are included on the slides on this virtual meeting website and on the Flood Control District website. I will also share a reminder of these instructions when we reach the Q&A portion of this meeting. We will now transition to Marcus Stuckett, our Flood Control District Engineering Division Director, who will share information about the district and about this project. Marcus?
Thank you, Shel, and a special thank you to each of you for joining us. In this presentation, we'll give you a brief overview of the preliminary plans for the Luce Bayou bypass channel. Before we get to the project overview, we wanted to quickly review the purpose of the two Luce Bayou channel project outreach meetings the Flood Control District hosted this week. There was a virtual meeting held on September 28, 2020 to discuss the acquisition of property directly impacted by this project. If you did not receive direct communications from the Flood Control District that your property will be impacted by this project, then your property will not be purchased by Harris County to construct the Luce Bayou bypass channel. We're hosting tonight's virtual community meeting to provide a project status update to the surrounding communities and to provide opportunities for individuals to ask questions about the project. We will not be discussing acquisition or conversations had with other property owners about their property in this meeting. An additional community engagement meeting will be scheduled in the future once we are further along in the preliminary engineering stage. The proposed Luce Bayou bypass channel project involves the construction of a man-made channel on the west side of Luce Bayou near Lake Houston to reduce the risk of flooding by decreasing water surface elevations in Luce Bayou. This new channel would reroute flows from Luce Bayou and discharge back into the bayou. The exact location of the proposed Luce Bayou bypass channel has not been finalized. The proposed Luce Bayou bypass channel project is one of the recommended projects that resulted from the Huffman area drainage analysis. The Huffman area drainage analysis was a multi-watershed study that involved Luce Bayou, Cedar Bayou, and the San Jacinto watersheds. The Huffman area drainage analysis consisted of an engineering investigation into the sources of flooding in and around the Huffman area and identified and proposed projects to reduce the risk of flooding. The Huffman drainage analysis determined the current level of service for Luce Bayou, analyzed historic flooding events, and met with the community to ensure flood control had knowledge of the areas with high risk of flooding. The study team then used engineering models built from total rainfall totals, topographic information, and environmental constraints to identify projects that would reduce the risk of flooding and minimize impacts to existing properties. The study concluded in late 2019 and consisted of two community engagement meetings. As you might recall from the previous community engagement meeting, the Flood Control District has several structural and non-structural tools for flood damage reductions. Structural tools include stormwater detention basins, channel maintenance, and channel modifications. Non-structural tools include buyouts and demolition of structures built too deep in flood-prone areas where structural projects to reduce flood levels are impractical. As part of the Huffman drainage analysis, different scenarios using these tools from the Flood Control District's Flood Damage Reduction Toolbox were examined. These concepts were then intermingled to determine a combination of scenarios that would reduce the impact to existing structures while still providing a reduction in flood risk. This combination of scenarios include channel modifications, upstream detention, and a bypass channel. The combination of scenarios presented to the community in July 2019 includes channel modifications with a width of 570 feet. The width of the optimized proposed channel provide the least impact to the existing development. It also includes construction of a stormwater detention basin located on the upstream end of Luce Bayou near the county line and provides approximately 7,000 acre-feet of detention storage. It also proposed a 325-foot width bypass channel. This exhibit illustrates our preliminary alignment. Again, that exact alignment is not final. However, our engineer for this project has looked at several alternatives for the alignment of the bypass channel and has determined that this preliminary alignment provides the most benefit to the area and provides the best solution for flood damage reduction. The Luce Bayou bypass channel will be located on high ground between Red Gully and Luce Bayou to not adversely impact existing drainage patterns. However, it is proposed to be built at natural ground and not elevated above ground. The purpose of constructing a bypass channel is to lower water surface elevations along Luce Bayou and therefore lowering flood risk. This will be accomplished by allowing stormwater to move through the newly constructed channel. Our project team examined multiple alignments before settling on this preliminary alignment. Multiple factors were considered, including minimizing the number of property owners affected by property acquisition, minimizing conflicts with existing buildings, homes, pipelines, and contaminated sites, the existing floodplain inundation, and consideration for the ability of overland flow to get into the channel. Implemented individually, each of these three components identified in the Huffman drainage analysis would provide incremental benefits in reducing structural flooding in the watershed. The benefits of the proposed bypass channel alone would result in reduction of flood risk and water surface elevations for approximately 300 properties within the Idle Lock, Lockshire, and Plantation Hill subdivision. A reduction in risk to local drainage issues within the waterway portion of Commons of Lake Houston, as well as other areas not within a specific subdivision. It also provides drainage relief for roadside ditches and FM 2100. The proposed Bayou bypass channel is the first step in this three-pronged approach to achieve a 100-year level of service within a Luce Bayou watershed. Please note that while this study was not originally intended to analyze localized flooding, the Flood Control District spoke to the residents' concerns at the March 2019 meeting and accounted for it. The bypass channel is intended to provide additional drainage relief as a result of this public input we received in 2019. The Flood Control District is coordinating with the Texas Department of Transportation, which is currently in the data gathering process to begin design of roadway improvements to FM 2100. Both the Flood Control District and the Department of Transportation are in the process of working on an agreement to accommodate the bypass channel crossing under the roadway, which will improve drainage conditions along FM 2100. A representative of the Department of Transportation is in attendance tonight and is available to answer questions regarding the roadway improvements. So where are we today? The proposed Luce Bayou bypass channel project is currently in the preliminary engineering stage, and we are working to determine the final alignment for the bypass channel to provide the desired flood risk reduction while minimizing property impacts. We are conducting a preliminary hydrology and hydraulic analysis, and we will soon begin field data collection in support of the preliminary engineering stage. This field data is critical for our engineers to be able to finalize the alignment. The preliminary engineering stage started at the end of April 2020 and is expected to be complete in summer of 2021. An additional community engagement meeting will be held prior to the completion of the preliminary engineering stage. We do not have all the answers to your questions at this time, as we are in the middle of the preliminary engineering stage. We will be back for another community engagement meeting prior to the completion of the preliminary engineering stage. On behalf of the Flood Control District, I would like to thank you for your interest in the proposed Luce Bayou bypass channel, and we look forward to a continued relationship with you and your community as we work together for a more resilient Harris County. Sheldra, back over to you.
All right, thank you, Marcus, for a helpful overview of this project, some real good information. Before we move into the Q&A session tonight, I do want to share a quick reminder that we would love to hear from you about this project and other projects going on across Harris County. If you have any additional questions or comments throughout the life cycle of this project, or if you'd like to sign up to receive email updates on this project and other projects in the watershed, you can visit hcfcd.org/F110. Community engagement is an important component of the work we do, and we invite your continued participation in this project as we move forward. As a reminder, there are 3 ways to submit a comment about this project during tonight's session. You can submit a comment on this site in the box near the presentation live stream. Submit a comment on the Flood Control District's website, hcfcd.org/F110, or you can submit a comment on the phone. And that number is 855-925-2801. Utilize the meeting code 9652. And if you're joining us via phone tonight, be sure to press *3 to leave a message. Additionally, I want to reiterate that any questions not addressed during tonight's Q&A will receive a response from the Flood Control District after the event. Information from this meeting and a recording of the live stream will be available for you to go back and look at on our website and also on our YouTube channel. Joining Marcus for our Q&A session tonight is Fred Garcia with the Texas Department of Transportation, and Melissa Spinks and Shannon Watson from the Harris County Real Property Division. So glad to have everyone here. Now it's time to take some of your questions, and we will move into the Q&A portion. Let's see here. So our first question, I have been following the Huffman drainage study for the last couple of years and have seen 3 different maps for this bypass channel. Are you sure this is where you're going to put it? Marcus, could you take that question?
Sure, and thanks for the question. So at this time, we are pretty confident in the alignment that we have right now. However, there's always a chance that things could change just because we're still doing investigations. But right now, this is what we are fairly confident that we will be moving forward with.
Okay, another question for you, Marcus. Will the diversion channel be full of water all the time or only during flood events?
Yes, and so I think, Josh, I think that what you're asking is whether or not you'll see water in the channel. I won't say it will be full, but there's a potential for there to be what we consider a base flow within the channel at all times, and that largely depends on how high or how low we set the elevation of the bypass channel. That's information that we hadn't gotten to yet, just again because we're so in the early stages of the preliminary engineering. but that's something that we will be able to answer as we move deeper into the preliminary engineering stage. But it's always a possibility that it could have some base flow.
And the next question is from Bill Sullivan. He's asking, what is the timeline for this project, specifically the property acquisition?
So right now, we are anticipating that acquisition could start anytime in between now and summer of next year. But we would be looking at mandatory acquisitions in the summer of 2021.
Marcus, can you talk to us a little bit about how this project is funded?
So it's a bit of a joint funding because we are working with TxDOT on their portion for FM 2100. So TxDOT will work with us to try to find a way to make the project equally beneficial for both parties, and portions of it will also be funded by the funds that are currently in the bond election from August 25th.
All right. Our next question is from Jennifer Raps, and she's asking, her understanding is this is a 10-year level of surface ditch. Does this now mean I will have a higher risk of flooding? I'm directly across the street from the proposed channel.
Yes, and just to be clear, everyone within Harris County has a risk of flooding. It's just the nature of where we live within the county. The vicinity of the bayou to you is not something that we expect would increase your risk of flooding. As we continue to look at our modeling, we do our best to make sure that the water is contained within that bayou and that it's providing more benefit to the community as opposed to transferring a flood risk from one property to another.
Okay. This next question, is there a sense of how the final channel will preserve aesthetics?
And at this point, it's too early to talk about how to preserve the aesthetics. But one of the things that we like to do is try to make sure that we are working with the community to make sure we understand the community's concerns and sort of get their input. So that's what we'll be looking at when we in August of next year, once we finalize this, before we go into design. We want to talk to the community. We want to gather their input. We want to see how they think it should look, some of the aesthetics that they would want to see. And it's at that point that we'll make a decision on whatever changes we need to make to accept that community input.
All right, some really good questions coming in, and we do want you to keep those questions coming in. And as a reminder, there are 3 different ways that you can submit a comment about this project during tonight's session. You can submit a comment on this site in the box near the presentation live stream, on the Flood Control District's website, hcfcd.org/F110, or you can also submit a comment by phone. That number 855-925-2801. Remember, you're going to utilize meeting code 9652 and to press *3 to leave us a message. Now we'll go to our next question from Marcus. This is from Robert and Sherry Wolf and Pam. And they ask whether there is an estimate about how wide or deep this bypass channel will be.
Yes, that's actually a good question. So right now we are looking at a 320-foot wide channel. Take off 60 feet on either side for our maintenance berms of our typical projects, and it's about 14 feet deep is what we're estimating right now.
All right, and our next question is from Chad Estes, and he's asking, will the water along the channel be able to enter the channel as runoff?
And I think what Chad is asking is talking about the sheet flow. But yes, that's one of the intents of this project is to capture the overland sheet flow within the area. Because based on some of the input that we gather from the community in other meetings, there was a large concern that sheet flow from the northern portion of the area was impacting their properties. So this bypass channel captures that sheet flow.
Eddie Blacknell rather, is asking, you mentioned design for a 100-year flood. The last few events have exceeded the 100-year categorization. What type of event result in flooding of the bypass? What type of event will this bypass channel be able to handle? Or actually, go ahead, Marcus.
So right now we are looking at about a 10-year level of service for that bypass channel, but the 100-year solution that I was referring to was the 100-year solution along Luce Bayou. So this bypass channel will also, in some of those smaller events where you were impacted by sheet flow or some other source, this bypass channel is intended to reduce that risk.
Thank you, Eddie, for that question. Ernest Smith is asking, will mosquito control be affected?
Yeah, and that one, I guess we would have to, Ernest, we'd have to respond to that one, I guess, in writing because maybe you can rephrase the question because I'm not sure how what you mean by mosquito control be affected. Sorry.
Maybe Ernest will send us in another question, a follow-up question for that. Marcus, what opportunities will the public have to provide input or feedback on this project after tonight's meeting?
Can you repeat that question, Sandra?
Yes. Other opportunities for the public to provide input or feedback about this project following tonight's meeting.
Right. So additional questions, you can go to our website at www.hcfcd.org/F10. I have hundreds of emails a day, but if I'd always take a question if someone wanted to email me, and that's marcusstuckett@hcfcd.hctx.net.
And he does answer his emails. Marcus is really good about that. Our next question is from Mandy and Mark Miller, and they're asking, will this cause houses on the perimeter of the channel that are currently not in the flood zone to become part of the flood zone?
So there will not be a mapping of, and when you say flood zone, I assume you're talking about the FEMA effective firm panels. So this project will not cause a property that's now not within the floodplain to all of a sudden be mapped within the floodplain.
Our next question, Marcus, is from Cassidy Rodriguez. Does the 320-foot include maintenance berms?
Yes, and that is correct. And I think when someone else asked about the size of the channel, I said that 320 feet minus 60 feet for our maintenance berm on either side of the top of banks of the channel. So before the channel starts to go down 14 feet, we'd have 30 feet on either side for us to continue to maintain the bypass channel.
Marcus, will this be a concrete channel?
No, at this time we are only considering a grass line channel. But again, as we continue to analyze, it's not to say it won't change.
All right, Marcus, you mentioned drainage reliefs, and when you were talking about the benefits this project will bring, can you talk a little bit more about that?
Right, and so some of the areas that we looked at when we were analyzing this particular segment alone, only the bypass, we looked at which neighborhoods would receive some benefit from that, And those would be the idle lock, which if you're looking at the exhibit in front of you, it's the smaller one at the very top of this exhibit. Lockshire, which is the one that's on the right side of this in the middle, and the Plantation Hills, which is the lower portion. Some other areas that would receive some benefit would be the Commons of Lake Houston subdivision that's located on the left side here. And it also improves the drainage for the future expansion of FM 2100. And I think the reason that that is important is because a lot of the neighborhoods that are along Luce Bayou itself see a lot of frequent flooding due to Luce Bayou. So this will help those areas in those smaller events, not the extreme events, not the 100-year events, but some of those lower events that they see some of the flooding issues or the drainage issues where they're stuck inside the neighborhood, can't get out while they're waiting on the water to drain off. This bypass channel will help that, and especially for the Commons of Lake Houston subdivision, which had what we consider a sheet flow problem. So water would overtop FM 2100 and cross over into that subdivision. Well, now with the bypass channel, it will capture that flow coming from that area and route it around the area safely.
And Marcus, what's the construction timeline for all of the recommendations made by the Huffman Drainage Study?
Yes, and at this point, we just don't have an estimation for a construction timeline. So, we're going to continue to try to flesh out this preliminary engineering stage, see what our final costs come out to be. And at that point, we can start figuring out which portions of the project we're going to take into design.
Could you walk us through the project life cycle again?
So in a standard project, we start off with what we consider a feasibility study. So this is what we met with the community about back in July 2019. So we get sort of what we call a high level look at the drainage issues in the area, and we develop a solution that we think provides the most benefit to the community within the area with the least amount of impact. From there, we go into what we call the preliminary engineering stage, or it's labeled as project development here. So this is where we start to refine those details that we saw in the feasibility study to carry it to the next stage, which would be design and the right-of-way acquisition. So these things sort of work around the same time, the acquisition of right-of-way and the design. And the design is where we take those ideas that were, math calculations and put them on paper so that they can be constructed. And of course, we maintain the facilities that we build indefinitely. But a typical project, if everything went great and everything was smooth, take about 9 months for a feasibility study. We take about another 9 months for our preliminary engineering stage. Sometimes the right-of-way acquisition, is sort of it's on the critical path. So it just depends on how long that takes, but that can vary just depending on the situation. But our design usually takes about another 9 months. And for most of our construction projects, we consider it about a year. So taking a project from the time it's an idea to the time that you would finally see something in the ground is usually about 5 years.
All right, thank you, Marcus. Let's see, our next question is from Pam, and she's asking, will the channel be fenced?
So that's not something that we typically do. We typically don't fence in our property. A lot of times our property abuts other developments, and those developments have fences, but we don't. It's not our standard procedure to put in fences around our channels.
Our next question, Mark, is why was this location chosen for this project?
So this location, we leaned on on our engineers to provide us with the best solution impacted the least amount of property owners. So that's one of the things that we really rely heavily on our engineers to make sure they do the investigations and look at these different alternatives to see whether or not the property that we're acquiring or the benefits that we're getting is equally beneficial for the large portion of the community. So we looked at different routes. We looked at okay, how many properties are we going to affect? How many properties are we going to help? We make sure we try to avoid any potential contaminations. So it was sort of it's been a long process to try to exactly nail this down. And I think what I would add to that, I think there was a question, something about the different alignments. We had preliminary alignments on the website, which we eventually pulled down because it was creating confusion with the public because we didn't have enough information at the time to share to let the public know exactly where we were going. And that's something that we have to work through. Make sure that the information that we're putting out doesn't create create a concern when it's unnecessary. So that's just one point I'd like to add.
Thank you, Marcus. And we do want to remind everyone that if you have any additional comments, of course, we want them to come in tonight, but even throughout the life cycle of this project, or if you want to get any other information about other projects going on in the watershed, make sure you go to our website, hcfcd.org/F110. You can leave a comment there and someone from the Flood Control District will respond to your comment or question. The next question from those of you at home is for Fred Garcia. This is Ernest Smith wants to hear about FM 2100 updates.
Okay, yes, I'm Fred Garcia on behalf of Texas Department of Transportation. Thank you, Harris County Flood Control, for inviting us, and thank you, members of the public, for your questions. I hope everyone can see the exhibit. The FM 2100 improvements are in two segments. If you see the yellow segment, that's the segment that's farthest along in the design process. The next segment to the north, going all the way to the Grand Parkway, that segment in red, is in a planning stage. At this point, we're going to have 2 lanes in each direction, curb and gutter section with storm sewers. The proposed bypass channel is something that we've been coordinating with the Flood Control District on. As you know, there's very limited drainage in this region, and that proposed bypass channel affords a lot of opportunity for the transport to try to better the drainage in the area. Is there a specific question other than that, or did I miss something with respect to that, Shaldra?
I think it was just a general overview, Fred.
So this is the general overview. The yellow segment is currently in design. We're about 60% design, and we plan to go to construction or start the construction process in about a year from now. The segment in red is in the planning stages, and that construction process begins approximately early 2024. And each of these construction schedules are going to probably last on the order of 3 years. So that's it in a nutshell. If there's any more detailed questions, I'm certainly happy to respond.
Thank you, Fred, and we're happy to have you here with us as well.
Thank you.
Next question for Marcus. This is from James Kramer. Will Luce Bayou itself be made wider or deeper?
Yes, that's a good question, and I think something important that that James asked was he said 2 words: wider and or deeper. Actually, the answer to that question is it will be wider, but we don't have plans to deepen it. So that's another phase of the project, but just understand it will be wider. We do expand on widening it, but we don't anticipate deepening that section of the channel.
And Marcus, how would this project impact other existing infrastructure in the area? Will there be any negative impacts downstream?
No. So one of our missions is to provide these flood damage projects that work. And so we don't take a risk area, we don't remove an area from risk and transfer that risk to other properties that are downstream. So part of our analysis in this preliminary engineering stage, before we go to design, before we purchase all of the property for the alignment, is to make sure that what we put in the ground does not affect others, does not negatively impact others in terms of water surface elevation. So I wouldn't lower the water surface elevation in the area upstream only to find out that the water that came upstream is now downstream and creating an impact for someone else.
All right, and Marcus, will the bypass channel be usable like Luce Bayou for any recreational purposes?
Yes, it's always one of our things to, if we do have a lot of channels and bayous that have trails along it. However, Harris County Flood Control District does not construct those trails or other recreational facilities, but we will partner with any other entities that are interested. And if the community knows of if the community has interest in that, when we get to our meeting before we finalize this preliminary engineering stage, that will be something that where we can bring it together, these other entities that may have interest in putting some of those recreational facilities on the flood control districts right away.
And how will flood control district restrict access to four-wheelers and other trespassers along the proposed maintenance buffer area?
Yeah, that's a huge issue that we see across the county. I guess the only thing I can offer is that, if you notice there's a lot of traffic like that, four-wheelers and thing within that's trespassing on the district's right of way, then we can always make sure that we work with law enforcement to make sure that they are patrolling the area to try to stop that, because it creates a problem for us as well when there are heavy vehicles or ATVs on the right of way. They create the rutting of the right of way, and it just creates all types of issues for us. So while we can't restrict it and we don't do anything to other than having guardrails at the major crossings, of course, they go around those. But one of our ways is, especially in our areas where we know we have that type of activity happening, we try to make sure law enforcement is aware and just try to get them to go out there periodically to make sure they're doing checks to try to keep people off of that.
All right, and we do want to remind everyone we're a little over halfway through our meeting tonight. As a reminder, there are 3 ways for you to submit your comments, so we still want you to get those in. You can submit a comment on this site box near the presentation live stream. You can submit a comment on our Flood Control District's website, hcfcd.org/F10, or you can reach us by phone. You can call 855-925-2801, utilize meeting code 9652. Remember, if you are joining us by phone, to press *3 to leave a message. Our next question now. Marcus, have you been coordinating with other local officials and entities about this project?
Yeah, so right now we are coordinating with TxDOT, the other entities, we have worked with them to make sure that this project will benefit their project as well.
All right, and another resident sent in the question, what are the projected benefits for this project? How much could water surface elevation be reduced in a 100 or 500-year event?
Yes, and so that's a question that it's kind of early for us to provide that information. What I can say that what we've looked at least up to this point, we'd be looking at about a 4-foot drop in water surface elevations along Luce Bayou, but that is so preliminary that I'm not even comfortable with saying, but I'm just saying we have at least looked at it and we know what that number is, but that could change based on the intake structure that we are working on developing right now.
All right, and sort of back to a question we asked earlier, going a little bit deeper into it, Marcus, you talked about funding for this project. How does the flood control district pursue funding for projects like this? What options are out there?
A lot of what we look, we look for help from the National Resources Conservation Services. They at times put out grants that allow us to develop, but it just depends on on what the application looks for. We have the uh, CDBG application, so that's the uh, Community Development Block Grants. Um, and that also sort of split and shares funding. So a certain amount of funding goes towards the district would provide a certain percentage, and the grant would provide the other percentage, and it's all based on being able to reach a certain amount, and also help help certain residents with flood damage reduction. So there are multiple sources that we looked at. Uh, in most of my presentations, there's a spaghetti model that shows all these different agencies, and that's probably on that exhibit alone, there's probably about 9 different agencies, and they all, between each of them, 3 or so different sources that we try to make sure we try to get some of that funding for Harris County.
And Marcus, we've been able to answer a lot of questions tonight, but there's still some answers that we're going to be gathering and that are going to be coming in as things progress. Why do you feel it's important to have this meeting, to talk to folks about this now?
Yeah, and what we've been getting a lot of questions, and I think that we've been working on trying to get answers, and so the district's silence has been taken as somehow we're hiding information, but the problem is when we start sharing things too early, then we start getting concerns from the residents. We start having residents calling and saying and really being concerned. And what we don't want to do is create a concern where there isn't one yet, because things are still being developed. Things are still changing, even though we are extremely comfortable with the alignment that we have right now. There is no 100% guarantee that won't change because we are so early in the process. But again, it's just one of those things where we want to try to get out and share information. We have a bunch of people asking questions and wanting to figure out what we're doing, where this project is going, how long it's going to take, and those answers just don't exist at this time. So we felt like by us doing this meeting now, it at least lets people know where we are right now, and it shares it to everyone as a whole. So we're not giving information to one resident, and then maybe that resident misunderstands what's being communicated, and then passing it to another resident. And it's the I think it's I can't think of the name of the game, but it's where you whisper something from one person.
Telephone.
There you go, telephone. Thank you. It's like a game of telephone. So you think that you're giving someone information, and it's intended to give them an update, but by the time it gets back around, it's a completely different story. So again, the intent of this was just to share with everyone with the updates, with where we are now, and we really want to try to be open with the public. A lot of times I go to meetings and people think that we're working with developers, or that we're somehow there's some nefarious thing taking place, and a lot of times it's because we don't have the information, and we're public servants. We don't get any benefit by impacting or hurting the public, and it's always just kind of our goal to make sure that the public is happy, that the public in general is happy with what we're putting out and what we're trying to do for the community.
Thank you, Marcus. Well said. Byron Smith asked about whether or not the channel will be discharging flows back into Luce Bayou upstream, or portions of Red Gully. Discharging flows back into Luce Bayou upstream.
Okay, and I think I'm trying to make sure I understand the question. So So he's asking whether or not the channel would be discharging flows back into Luce Bayou upstream of the confluence of Red Gully. And so, as of right now, we are pulling flows off of. Oh, I'm sorry, changed my screen. So we are pulling flows off upstream of Red Gully, and looking at discharging them further downstream. But again, we're still trying to work on that.
Alrighty. Marcus, someone mentioned they'd like to sell their property before summer 2021. Can you purchase my property sooner was the question.
And so right now, especially if you're within the alignment, we definitely be interested in purchasing the property. As we continue to work these things out, we will be reaching out to those. We've already reached out to those that we are pretty sure are directly affected, or those that had the potential to be affected. But it's definitely a possibility that we would be interested in purchasing the property before then.
And Marcus, Jennifer Rapps is asking, she says, I'm worried about the future of our property with it being quite so close. Wondering if she's going to be looking directly at a channel or if it will be hidden by trees.
So the question is whether or not will the channel be hidden by trees, or whether or not they'll be able to see the channel. With and I mean, it's just really too early to tell. I personally haven't been out to Mrs. Rapp's house, but I think that it just depends on where you're standing. But the trees being there, again, it's always something that we can consider, as long as the residents are working with us to let us know what their concerns are once this thing starts to take more shape and become more of a towards the end of the preliminary engineering stage or starting the design stage. Additional tree plantings is always something that we're open with doing while we work with the public on that.
All right, another question just in. When in the project life cycle, do we typically have more answers around timelines, funding options, and other project specifics? What steps do we need to take before then?
Right. So again, the big thing is getting through the fully completing the preliminary engineering stage, because there's a lot of data gathering that takes place. So, we have to go out and make sure that, we do preliminary analysis on, let's say, wetlands. And we try to minimize that impact on those wetlands. Well, we can do what we consider a desktop study. That's looking at maps, historical maps of areas that were identified as wetlands. But until we actually get out on the sites and actually, have boots on grounds, walking around these different properties, walking the full alignment and identifying where there actually wetlands are, we just don't know. And it's the same thing with the depth and the elevation that's set for the bypass, whether or not we need to move it, 20 feet to the left or 20 feet to the right. All of that stuff really doesn't come together until the end of the preliminary engineering stage. So, that's a critical point, and that's something that I really would like the community to understand, that, a lot of times, when you see these ideas and these feasibility studies, they're only looking at whether or not they could help. But, having a definite, path forward and exactly what it's going to look like does not happen until the end of the preliminary engineering stage. Now, things slightly change once you get in the design stage, because at that point, now you have contractors moving around, they're digging things up. There are things that contractors find that, an old pipeline that no one knew existed. We've had that happen several times. But for the larger part, the absolute definite path forward happens once we finish the field work and finish the preliminary engineering stage.
And Marcus, I think when we talked earlier about funding options and the ways that we fund our different projects and seek to fund it, mentioned funding for this program, but this one doesn't actually, we don't have any federal funding for this particular project. Is that right?
Yes, that is correct. The funding for this project, for this project specifically, for the Luce Bayou Bypass project, is as of right now a 100% bond funded project.
All right, just want to make sure we were able to clarify that because we did get a question coming in. And just to remind you, a couple more minutes left here. Do want to remind you how you can submit a comment. Again, that's on the live stream. You can also do that on our website. And then you can also give us a call, leave a message. We'll be happy to answer any questions that you have, questions or comments. If we don't get to your questions during tonight's event, then someone from the Flood Control District will follow up with you at a later date. Marcus, how can the community, stay involved throughout the life cycle of this project?
Yes, and then that's a similar question to what I was asked previously. Again, you can always go to the website to submit a comment, as Sheldra just mentioned. And again, I'm always open. I open myself up to this, which is why I have so many emails a day. Is I'm always open to people contacting me directly if they have a question or they don't feel like we're responding fast enough. My email address is Marcus, MARCUS STCKETT at hcfcd.hctx.net. So again, I have questions that you want to bring to me directly, those type of things. I'm always open to try to keep things moving forward, to try to get you the answers. I'll just say a lot of times it may not be the answer that you want to hear, but I do my best to not go radio silence on most of the. I say most of the people that contact me, especially when it's the public.
And again, Marcus just mentioned, our website is there on your screen. There's a wealth of information about this not only this project, but other projects. We update this website frequently, so please use it as a resource to gather information and to stay up to date with not only this project, but other projects that are going on in our watershed or in your watershed. All right, I think we're winding down with the questions that have been coming in. We've had such a great response from those of you at home sending us your questions. We really appreciate you taking the time to tune in tonight and share your comments and questions with us. Please continue to stay involved and please continue to stay in contact with us if you have any additional questions. And with that, we'd like to, share one final reminder. As I just said, we can't say it enough, that we do want to hear from you. Do want to thank you again for joining us this evening and for all of your engagement in this project. We can look forward rather to continuing to share updates with you. Want to thank everybody for being with us tonight and thank all of our speakers and those who are in attendance ready to go if needed. So stay safe, everyone, and have a great evening.